Hello, Alabama fans, and welcome back to the Bama Online Big Show. It's been a minute since we had the whole staff on board, but we've got Charlie Potter with us, team extraordinaire, Blake Byler, who dips his head and hands and toes into basketball, recruiting, and football here for you right now. We're going to go over the spring game. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Charlie's going to give us some information for anybody who's thinking about going. Later on in the show, we're going to have Andrew Bone, our recruiting expert, coming in with me. We're going to chop it up a little bit on the recruiting because it's a massive, massive weekend. And we can't forget basketball. They will not let us forget them. They will not let us. They have a little new story every day. Portal in, portal out. A lot of activities going on there. But Charlie, first, tell the BOL followers, tell us about what's going to happen tomorrow at A Day for Alabama.
Yeah, it's not your typical spring game. I think most people have realized that by now, but if not, it's not going to be a scrimmage. It's going to be an hour and a half practice, and I know that's a bummer for some people because they like to see the team. They like to see good on good, or ones versus twos, just a game in general. But you can see across the country, a lot of teams have stopped doing. Some people aren't doing spring games at all, like anything. And Alabama's going to have the practice open. It's going to be very similar to an 8A format in terms of the day, how it's laid out. You're going to have the Walk of Fame ceremony over at Denny Chimes a couple hours before that noon kickoff. It's going to be, you're going to have the captains and Kalen DeBoer over there, guys like Malachi Moore and Tyler Booker, Jalen Milrow, Deontay Lawson. They're going to put their hands and cleats
That's awesome.
in the cement over there. And then I think gates open at 11. The practice starts at noon. Like I said, it's going to be about an hour and a half, and you'll get to watch the whole practice. For me, I know, like, I get it. I get the frustration by not being able to see and watch a spring game because none of this is going to be televised either. So if you're wanting to sit at home and turn it on, switch between that and the Masters on Saturday, can't do it. It's not going to be anywhere unless somebody's like streaming it illegally, and I know that's going to lead to some people at Alabama pulling their hair out. But I just enjoy going to football practice. I think everybody knows that. I've been a large proponent of the media viewing periods when those went away. But you get to watch a whole practice, and then afterwards, if you're a Yay Alabama member, I don't have all the list of things, the tiers and the payments in front of me. But if you're a Yay Alabama member, you can go on the field and get autographs from Coach DeBoer, the coaching staff, the players, reminiscent of the fall whenever they used to have the run into the gumps. So that'll be something you could do after the practice if you pay a little bit. The spring practice in and of itself, the 8A event, is free to attend, but if you want to do anything afterwards, it's going to cost you a little bit. And then there's a lot on campus. There's baseball, there's softball. It should be a fun day. Should be a nice day weather-wise. But you got to be there. You can't watch it on TV.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I don't know the people like, I don't know anybody who watches the spring game like it's a real football game. I've never met that human being who thought, Nick Saban is on the field in a sports coat. Did y'all,
Yeah.
that should tell you it's not a real game right there. And he's microphone.
Well, I'll say this too. There's a lot of overreaction from one spring game
Oh,
too.
yes,
It
there is.
happens every year. Now, some of it's warranted. We've seen some of it in the past.
Yeah.
I think John Mechie's a guy that stands out to me as someone that looked good in the spring and lived up to it. But we've also seen the inverse of that. We've seen Ajay Hall have a good spring
Uh,
game, and then
a great game. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
even know what Ajay's up to these days. So probably nothing good. But it can go either way. There's been a lot of guys that have stood out in the spring. You could have somebody that just pops on that one day, and then that's what you're talking about for the next 2 to 3 months. But and then he might not produce in the fall. So it's a little bit of a slippery slope there. But I get it. I get it.
Blake, what are your thoughts? We get to see football. If you're there, you get to see football. Look, you can say what you want. And there's guys sitting out, but a lot of the guys sitting out are guys we know exactly who they are, right? You're getting a chance to see Dijon Lee and Keelan Russell and Justin Hill and all the freshman newcomers, which was a fantastic class. I still think I think it was ranked number 3, but it was definitely neck and neck for 2 and 1 that whole year. But unbelievable amount of talent, plus the portal guys, Blake.
Yeah, it's exciting to get to see these guys and to see them do football things, even if it's not really a good on good scrimmage. Like you're still getting the opportunity to see some pretty unique stuff, and really for fans too. This is an opportunity to see. Like I know they want to see a scrimmage, but also fans don't really get practice access like ever. You get to kind of see what drills look like, what different things that they go throughout a practice period look like. And I know whenever we get our practice viewings for the media and we put clips on Twitter, like people eat it up. People love to see little bits and pieces of what it looks like behind the curtain and drills and things like that. And so now you get to go and you get to kind of see like an hour and a half of that. You get to see what the entire thing kind of looks like. So I think that can be exciting to some people, especially people that just like really love the game of football. They love the X's and O's. They love getting into kind of the nitty gritty of it, of the game. So I think that's going to be really cool to see. And I understand wanting to see a scrimmage, but this it in. And like y'all already mentioned, like this is happening at a lot of other places, and this is also better than having nothing at all. Like a lot of places have straight up canceled their spring game. So getting something, I know most Alabama football fans are just excited to see Alabama football, excited to be in Bryant Denny Stadium, no matter what they're getting to watch. So there are a lot of newcomers that people are excited to see, that I'm excited to see. We get a little closer look at guys like Keelan Russell, Dijon Lee, even transfers coming in, like Isaiah Horton at receiver, Cam Calhoun at corner. Like there are a lot of guys that can make immediate impacts that we're going to kind of get our first glimpse at, our first closer glimpse at here on Saturday.
Yeah, I tell you, guy I'm looking forward to, and we'll get into this a little bit, was Cam Dewberry. I want to see what big man could do on that offensive line. Charlie Potter, let's talk quarterbacks. I know most people didn't think we're going to bring him up, but quarterback, a lot of discussion, a lot of trends we've seen this year. Ty Simpson, a lot of discussion about why he didn't take the job last year. Will he take the job this year? You got Keelan Russell, who some think's the number one quarterback in the country. I certainly think he checks every box. And then you had like an Austin Mack push, basically because Ryan Grubb came back, which was kind of it was kind of a weird. It was kind of. I see the connection, but I mean, you're talking about a guy that spent a year not looking at Austin Mack, so I thought it was a little bit of a stretch. But tell us a little bit about the quarterbacks, what you've seen and what you want to see.
I'm honestly surprised it took 6.5 minutes to get the QBs. It feels like that's kind of the first thing on everybody's list. But no, I mean it's a topic everybody wants to discuss. I think that'll draw a lot of people to practice. I don't think you're going to have 90,000 people at a 90-minute practice, but the fact that you are breaking in a new quarterback has people interested. And we're what now 13 practices in. They're going to practice again this morning on Friday, and obviously they have the practice on Saturday. This is the first time they're going back to back to back all spring. I think it's the first time they've had consecutive days of practice all spring. So an interesting close here. But they've had 3 scrimmages to go through. I think when you break it down, I think Ty Simpson's been the most consistent quarterback this spring. I think Keelan Russell's probably had the most wow plays. And you got to take into consideration context is always key, and a lot of times that's left out. You got to think about who they're going against, who they're working with, and I think he might have gotten some first team reps in this final scrimmage on Thursday, but for the most part, Keelan Russell's been with the 2s and 3s, so hasn't faced the best defense, but also doesn't have the best guys around him. You have to take that into consideration. For the most part, it's been Ty Simpson and Austin Mack getting those first team reps. And I think even Ryan Grubb, when he was talking to ESPN, broke down the reps that they've had this spring. And from just like a team standpoint, and I think Austin Mack kind of had a little bit more. So he is a guy that I think all 3 are firmly in the mix. Again, I think Ty's been the most consistent. I think in that second scrimmage, the one that the Red Elephant Club members were at and where a lot of information got out, I think Austin Mack struggled. It was almost like he was trying to force things, a guy trying to win the job. And I think to some extent, you want to see that. You want to see a guy try to take initiative, but to what extent? You want to be able to take care of the football. So right now, I know it's probably people are going to roll their eyes, but it is kind of status quo. It is the pecking order in terms of seniority, but it'll be interesting to see what happens these next 2 practices. And again, I think people are frustrated by the coach speak and the lack of maybe information or details given out by this coaching staff, but it makes a ton of sense for them to keep everything close to the vest from a public standpoint because they want to keep all 3 of these guys on campus. The spring portal is going to open, and you don't want to be sitting there with 2 quarterbacks. Maybe if like a younger guy starts to move ahead. I don't think that's necessarily been the case. I don't think Ty Simpson's done anything to lose that top spot right now, but I think those other 2 are pushing, and I think the coaching staff is maybe wanting to see it stay that way so they have all 3 of these guys on campus this fall.
If I had any advice for players on the team during spring practice, it's to really bring your A game the day the fans are allowed in. The the Red Elephant Club members are allowed in. You want to be at your best.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you keep that momentum going. Blake, let's talk a little bit about injuries. Got some guys sitting down, and it should be noted. There's, if this was game day, if this was opening FSU game tomorrow, a lot of these guys would be playing. This is precautionary, and I know the fans want to see him. Kind of, there's been a little bit of gripes, but who gives it? You don't want to see him now. You want to see him at that season opener. But go over some of the guys who've been injured and some of the guys given a chance to step up. And Charlie, I'll swing it around to you when Blake's done.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them. There are a lot of guys that are going to be missing, that have been missing kind of throughout spring and aren't going to be present for A-Day. I mean, I think you start with there's a number of places you could start. Tight end is probably the worst when you talk about the number of guys that are missing. I mean, you've got Josh Cuevas is out. Danny Lewis is out, Marshall Pritchett's out, and that's 3 of your 4 tight ends total that are on campus right now because Caleb Edwards is coming in as a summer enrollee. So then I think they've been playing offensive tackle William Sanders at tight end some throughout some of these scrimmages, and then Jay Lindsey is kind of your only guy left there. So tight end's been a tough one. Offensive line, Caden Proctor's missed time, so they've been rotating guys in at left tackle. I know freshman Jackson Lloyd has gotten a little bit of run there. You got linebacker Deontay Lawson still recovering. Justin Jefferson has been dealing with things throughout the spring, so that's another unit where your top 2, your most experienced guys are missing. So that's leaving a lot of time for young players, your 3 freshmen at inside linebacker. And then you've got guys like QB Reese. You've got guys like Caden Jones, who are going into their second year. Nakai Hill-Green, the transfer from Colorado, is getting some time there. So that's another one where most of your experienced guys are missing. Corner, Damani Jackson. So your top returning corner is out. You got Xavier Brown, who's got a year of experience under his belt and has been able to kind of be the top corner throughout drills and everything like that. But you're breaking in young guys. You've got a transfer in Cam Calhoun coming in. You've got Dijon Lee, who we've already talked about as a true freshman, who's made some plays and wowed some people, but he's still learning the system. So there's you can start with that. Those 4 position groups that you're missing a lot of guys, and they're trying to break somebody in. I'll throw it to Charlie to kind of go through the rest of them.
You can't throw it to Charlie. I'm throwing it to
I'll
Charlie.
throw it to Tim, who can then throw it to Charlie.
All right, double
Double
play. I would
pass.
like to say that I'd like to applaud Caden Proctor, who's my spirit animal. He's going to go through a whole college career and never go through spring.
Mm-hmm.
That's an amazing. I mean, and be a pretty good player. And I'm saying that tongue in cheek. Obviously, he could play if he needed to, but it's pretty impressive never to have to get out there and do those winders. So, Charlie, talk a little bit about any injuries that Blake didn't cover that stands out, and then we're going to get into a couple of things like the position battles of note, young players standing out.
Yeah, chestnut checkers for Caden Proctor.
Yeah.
The big fella knows what he's doing. I think the offensive line has been a little banged up. I know we haven't seen Casey Poe out there. I don't know, somebody that people were asking about because in the second scrimmage and then in the practice we got to see on the heels of that, you look at that second team offensive line, they had 3 true freshmen out there. You had Jackson Lloyd at left tackle, you had Mal Waldrop at guard, and then you had Michael Carroll at right tackle. So and that shows you how banged up they are. I mean, not that those true freshmen aren't good. I think we know what this true freshman class can do from an offensive line standpoint. But the fact that they're having to plug and play maybe in the second team, you have a guy like Olasolinen at left tackle because of injuries. They just had to move a lot of things around, and that's what I would caution. Like on Saturday when fans go out there and they see the offensive line, and maybe they struggle a little bit. This is hypothetically speaking. You got to think. They're not at full strength. They don't have their full guys out there.
They should struggle a little bit, right, though, considering who they're going against on the defensive line. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a decent group, some experience. If they don't struggle, I mean, that's actually a big kudos to them, in my opinion.
Well, I will say, like, you hear a lot in the spring. Think about like when Will Anderson was on campus, when Dallas Turner was on campus. Those guys can wreck a spring, especially because the quarterbacks are in black. Like they don't have to actually bring them to the ground; they just have to touch them. They can ruin an offensive coordinator's day because you can't do the things you want to do. I haven't really heard much of that this spring. I think the offensive line's done a solid job. I think though they know too, like pass rush is obviously a point of emphasis because Alabama didn't have a ton of sacks last year. But I think that's kind of been a little give and take and back and forth. But I think, safety is interesting because Keon Sabb is out. He's a guy that Kalen DeBoer gave an update on here recently. He's doing well. I know pro day, we saw him on crutches. So it sounds like he might have had a little bit of a setback, but that gives opportunity to guys like Zay Mincy, who I think they feel really good about.
Yeah,
Bray
they do.
Hubbard's obviously there. You have some young guys like Cam Howard, who I think's done some good things this spring. But yeah, it's you could really go down the list. Ryan Williams is a guy that's probably not going to be out there on Saturday. But again, that goes back to Tim's point. If they were playing Florida State on Saturday, Ryan would play. They're being cautious, and I think that's smart. The guys that you know what you have with Damani and Keon, and well, Deontay can't play because he's coming off an ACL injury, but both of those inside backers, Caden Proctor, maybe even a guy like Danny Lewis, like you know what you have in those guys, so you kind of shut them down as much as you can to get them ready for the fall. But it's a laundry list. When Kalen DeBoer came out the first day of spring, it was double-digit players. That list has only grown, and again, it's being safe rather than sorry here to cap the spring.
I mean, people can say what they want. They want to see him play, but one of them gets out. It's like the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Why is he in? Why is he in? Why is he in? You see that every game when somebody was in an 11-point game with 9 minutes left. That's not as locked down as you might think, but that's going to definitely be multiplied by 10 when you get to a spring game. Why is he in if he doesn't need there? And another thing, the guys you're mentioning, Damani and that crew, they're also mentally tough. They're built
Mm-hmm.
right. They're upperclassmen. We've seen how mature they are. So them, and plus talented, we know what they can do. We kind of touched on the position battles. Blake, let's go to a couple of young guys. Give me a couple of young guys that have stood out to you. Let's extend it to new guys too. If it's a portal guy, that's fine. But some guys who jumped out at you, we'll go around to Pot. We'll go back to Potter. We'll talk about these guys a little bit.
Yeah,
Don't
I'll
say
do one on offense, one on.
Latsier Brooks. Don't say Latsier
What
Brooks.
if I want to say Latsier
I want
Brooks?
to say Latsier. Charlie wants to say Latsier. Andrew's in the background waiting to come on. He wants to say Latsier. We all want to say. Let's be real. Let's talk about Latsier for a minute. We love this guy. There's some players. I watch all the film. I love watching high school film. It's one of the things I do. Friday night, I watch several games live. I watch lots here every week. He's just fun. He did things. We would, Andrew, all of us would be watching them, sharing highlights and all that stuff because he was so much fun. The debate. Now, if y'all remember early on, I said, I don't, it's not saying he's Jalen Waddle, but there's a lot of traits very similar to Jalen Waddle. Size, small school, elusive, quick, fast, and all that stuff. And got a lot of pushback. And it's true when you say he's the next Jalen Waddle, fans will go, hey, now but if we say it, Charlie, Andrew, any of us, if we say it, we know what it means to say he might be the next Minka or whoever, which we never would say. We never say you're the next Minka. But anyways, Blake, I know you want to talk about lots here. Go ahead. I just want to beat you to it.
No, y'all saw the clips that have been circling around Twitter, I'm sure, of him at
Absolutely.
practice, and like you don't want to say Jalen Waddle, but he does wear number 17 and he's short and he's really shifty. So they do
Yeah.
have those comparisons, and he looks like a beast out there. And we've heard, even DBs, Bray Hubbard, a couple other guys talk about him and say like he's just like a lightning bolt. Like he's really hard to catch, and that makes life hard on those guys. And he's an interesting guy that can be used out of the slot. Some other new guys, I think Cam Calhoun's an interesting one because you've got some room at corner here with Damani hurt for him to be able to make an impact. But also, really early in the spring, a lot of guys talked about how vocal of a guy Cam Calhoun is, and that was kind of a talking point the first couple of times we talked to players was just the energy that he's constantly carrying. He's constantly yelling. He's constantly talking on the field, in the locker room, everything like that. So a high energy guy is somebody that is really fun to have, especially on the back end. And that's a guy that I'm kind of, excited to be able to talk to here. Once we do get to talk to transfers and everything. And then another guy, I really think Dijon Lee, like somebody that we've mentioned, Kane Womack called him a really long ass corner. Like whenever we first talked to him about him, and like you can see it when you watch him and when you see a clip of him. Like he is all of 6'3". He is a massive corner, and so it's interesting because they had a really big corner last year as a freshman in Zay Mincy and ended up moving him to safety. But what we saw from or what Kane Womack told us was that he wants to keep Lee at cornerback right now, and that's a really big advantage to have a corner that big, to be able to match up with big receivers and everything like that. Zay Mency's another one who, with Keon Sabb out, you could see him at safety. You could see him getting some more time there. I almost wonder if he's a guy who could compete for that Husky spot whenever the fall rolls around, because we don't know exactly who's going to have that job. So yeah, those are a couple guys, but I'm really excited to see everybody, because Saturday is going to be a really good chance to see anybody that we haven't gotten a good close look at yet.
One more thing about Brooks I love, he leaned into 17. He leaned
Mhm.
into the, you know what I mean? He didn't go with a number. That just took it to the next level. And then when you see him in 17, he does physically look very much. Before we go to basketball, Charlie Potter, tell us a few young guys, transfer guys that have stood out for you. It can be doubles up with Blake. Um, Obviously, mention a few guys that impressed you so far in the limited looks. The video, y'all see them live.
Yeah, I mean, just talking to people, I think the corners are interesting. What Blake was talking about, because you would think that with Damani out, Cam Calhoun would be just a plug and play just in the spring, but it's actually been Dijon Lee that's been working with the ones. I know he was there in that scrimmage, the second scrimmage, and then the practice we got to go to, we kind of got to see a little bit of the back end of the secondary and the linebackers, and he was there with the ones with Xavier Brown. So a true freshman that has certainly stood out. I mean, Lancier Brooks goes without question. After that second scrimmage, the first text message that I got, it just said 17. So no offense to Kelby Collins. I knew who they were talking about. So I think when you look at a transfer standpoint, though, Lancier Brooks got a lot of attention. Isaiah Horton's been as advertised. I think he could be your true number 3 receiver with Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams. I think he's done a lot of good things. I think he's had 2 or 3 really good scrimmages. So he's been consistent this spring, and I think that's really big, because this is a wide receiver group that's basically a 180 of last year. It's not just the 2 guys at the top. They could roll 6, 7, 8, 9 deep if they wanted to. They have a ton of talent in that room, because Derek Meadows, the other true freshman, who's a complete opposite of Latsier Brooks, because he's a hulking presence out there. He's a guy that's had a nice spring too. So one thing, it kind of goes back to the injuries. We haven't got to see a lot of the new guys that are specialists coming in, because those are 3 positions that are key for this team, because you lose James Burnip and Graham Nicholson and Neelan Hibbett. Alex Asparuhov's the true freshman punter. He's been out with an injury. David Bird, the transfer from Cal, he's been out with an injury. So I'll be interested to see what the specialists look like on Saturday, because they have been banged up. But those are 2 new guys that could come in and compete right away for starting spots. I think you could go down the list. I think the offensive line has done a nice job. I think Justin Hill at that Wolf linebacker spot has done some impressive things this spring. Ivan Taylor at safety. The list goes on and on. I mean, it would be hard pressed not to mention Keelan Russell, like we did at the top with the quarterbacks, made a ton of wild plays. He's been, he's had his freshman moments, which is to be expected. He's going through his first college practices, but he's also shown, hey, this is why this guy was considered, the number 1 player in the country by a lot of people coming out of Texas.
All right, we're going to go to basketball. It's been a little bit eventful. We thought maybe we'd had the roster locked down. I mean, just to recap for those that haven't followed Bama that closely, you have Jaron Stevenson hit the portal this week. Not a complete surprise. We knew Jaron might want something change of pace a little bit. We saw Mo D. That was pretty much a surprise, I think, to most of us. He hit the portal and went to Kentucky. Got a very healthy NIL from our standing, and is going to get to play more, kind of what he's looking for. And then you've got Nas Cunningham, who went early, which was expected. The one thing I'll say about NATO's, I think he puts the roster together as well as anybody in the country. Him and Preston Murphy, I think it's A plus, 10 out of 10 across the board, putting a roster together. And I don't think they're, players and their people, agents have demands they want. They want playing time. They want NIL. They want to have impact on who actually these teams sign. And I don't mean Alabama. I mean across the country. They want input. They want to make as much a chance as possible that they're going to be successful. And Nate Oates isn't going to play that game. He's not. He's not going to play. Yeah, I'll give you this and I'll give you that. And that playing time for Mo was a discussion point. That playing time for Jaron was a discussion point. But Blake, right now we're really looking at 2. Right, we're looking at 2 guys. We're looking at Darion Reed and we're looking at LeBaron Philon. 10 players on roster right now. 1 spot to fill, but those 2 are still trying to figure out what they're going to do. And it's possible, they both could be gone next year.
Yeah, I think those two are interesting. I think obviously Darion Reed is probably more likely to come back considering LeBaron Philon's NBA future. But with Reed, I think he had a frustrating freshman year. I mean, he had a really big impact early, and he was playing, I think, closer to like 15, 16 minutes a game early through the first couple of weeks. And then he got the foot injury that knocked him out for a game. Then he came back, and then he had the hamstring injury. They kind of had him off and on. I think he missed 12 games over a 15-game stretch. And so having to miss that much of conference play of your freshman year has to be really frustrating. Whenever I talked to him in, I think it was Cleveland, he said it was frustrating. He said he was aggravated by the way that kind of the injuries had gone. And then he kind of lost his spot in the rotation, as you do when you miss 12 games, and kind of had to play spot minutes throughout the NCAA tournament. But I think he's a guy that can be really good. Nate Oats has always said he thinks he's a pro. He thinks he's going to be a pro, and I think he can be as well. Just super athletic, super good defender. Needs to work on his outside shot, but I think he can be a really solid
Competitive.
player.
He likes to compete too. He
Yes,
likes to
yes,
play. Yeah.
very
He's a guy
competitive.
and I see that frustration aspect because you saw him want to be on that court, right? So that,
Yeah.
yeah, that led, Troy's not too far off from Alvin Kamara, where he was injured, got frustrated by the time December rolled around. Blake Alvin Kamara is a football player
I,
that played at Alabama when you're like
He's
3.
still in the NFL.
Yeah. I'm just kidding. Blake, I'm sorry. Charlie, let Charlie talk about Phelan for a minute. Obviously, let's get into this. I want Blake's opinion, but I want yours first. Bama doesn't need a John Stockton type point guard, right? Nobody does anymore. I mean, LeBron brings up the floor. Brandon Miller brought it up the floor. The John Stockton type lead guards are kind of gone. They just need a facilitator. Obviously, LeBaron's one. It's our understanding, Charlie, that he's going to go through the draft process and just see how that thing pans out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be great to have LeBaron Philon back, and that's not off the table because you have forever. Honestly,
Yeah,
that's the
ever.
problem with this going through the draft process is you can string this out to like late May, and that's when you're putting together a roster like Nate Oates is that can be an issue. But I think LeBaron in year 2 would be just unbelievable in this system, and I think that obviously he'd be your top guard. But you got guys like Aiden Holloway. You bring in a guy like Jalil Bethia from Miami who can be on the ball. You've got Latrell Wrightsell coming back from injury who can play a little bit of point guard. I think he did that at Fullerton before he got to Alabama. I think that's in his wheelhouse too. So you have options there. But I think just when you look at that last roster spot, I think even if LeBaron Philon were to withdraw from the draft and return to school, I think you could still look to add a guard just because the numbers are a little lower there. They did have 4 main guards this year, but you had a couple sideline by injury. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do just from a roster filling out standpoint. But I think with Fileline, it makes too much sense to go through the process when you have the option to come back. It's not like the NFL when you declare you can't come back. If you're not drafted, you can't come back, all that stuff. I think you go, you get the feedback because right now you look at a lot of these mock drafts, which I know that's not the end all be all. LeBaron Philon's not that prevalent on those. So he could go get the feedback, come back, or he could go impress at the combine if he gets an invite and improve his stock. So it's an opportunity for these guys. I think everyone that can should do it. I don't blame it at all for doing it. It's just it makes our job a little harder. I know it makes NATO's job harder just because you don't know when those guys are going to be back on your roster or if they are going to be back on your roster.
And before we get out of here, one thought I've always had is there's no guarantee. Kids can't say, if I'm not top 20, I'll come back. Because 22 could be the Dallas Mavericks. You know what I mean? 22 could be Golden State or the Lakers or any scenario like that. So are you really going to draw the line playing in Boston at 20? Nope. You should have got me at 20. That's a thin line. We saw Charles Bediako not getting any draft status and go that way. We saw JD Davison do a similar thing. So I don't think LeBaron is clear cut. Like JD was like one and done. Like, no, I don't have to be lottery. No, I'll go to Europe. I don't like that stuff. But anyways, we're going to get out of here. We'll catch up next week after the spring practice, see how everything went and what thoughts we have. Charlie Potter, Blake Byler, thank you so much. We're going to bring in Andrew Bone now. He'll be sitting too close to his screen. I can see him right now. But see you guys.
See you, Tim.
Boom. Hello, Andrew.
What's up?
You're looking. I saw you in the background. I saw you in the back, the green room, laid out, looking sharp.
Mm-hmm. What's up?
Everyone, this is Andrew Bone. As you know, my cohort. We are the recruiting guys for BamaOnLine.com. Been a hectic 2025, starting with January. I mean, that was a busy season, and we get to the visitors that just continuously come through in the spring. I think the staff does a great job there. But again, Andrew Bone, jump in, give us some thoughts, Andrew. Let's talk about the difference between year one and year two in April of 2025 versus April of 2024.
I think you can look back even at junior day back in February. I mean, this wasn't let's meet that new Alabama staff for the first time. A lot of those guys that came in back in February, they'd been to campus last year. They'd been to camp last summer. They'd been to games in the fall. So they knew the coaching staff pretty well. It's all about, how hard was Alabama going to start recruiting you and pursuing you and try to get you back for spring practice or really push for official visits. I mean, obviously we've seen close to 50 official visitors already set, and even before A-Day, and we used to see those official visits set after A-Day and into the spring evaluation period. But things have certainly changed. I mean, you have these relationships now with coaches that have stemmed back for over a year with a lot of these guys, and they've been able to go out there and recruit. Go out there and evaluate. Whether it was during the season, the fall, in the January contact period, and last January they were just going out saying, "Hey, I'm the new coach at the University."
Half of them even weren't even on the road. You remember that? You had Duvall and Ha
and because they were still under, a lot of those
absolutely
coaches were still under contract with other schools, so they couldn't get out there until they
Yeah.
brought in kids for spring practice or go out there during the spring evaluation period in April. So a lot has changed over the course of the last year.
Yeah,
And
I think a lot of people forget that there was like a 6-week window where they weren't even on the road. They were working out their Washington contract to get through the 365 day or whatever period it was, and then jumped in at Bama. But there was like, you saw a lot of the guys, and we sent a lot of praise that way for Denzel, Chap,
yeah.
Josh Chapman. A lot of those guys were out there doing the banging and knocking on doors along with Freddie Roach and Robert Gillespie. But I agree with you, Andrew. You flash forward a year. Last year it was kind of speed dating, right? Get them on spring, shake their hand. You're just flying them through. And I don't know how many the number was that came through last spring. It was absurd. I mean, 200. I don't know what it was. There's a ton of kids.
It was a
But
high
this
number.
year,
There was 1 week where there was over 100 players in town. Now, obviously, a lot of those
absurd.
guys weren't. A lot of those guys ended up not being Alabama targets, but you had to get those guys
Yes,
on campus to figure out if they were going to be a target.
because you didn't know.
Yep.
Yeah, you didn't know what they were coming. You're right. Flash forward a year. These guys killed it in January all over. We've talked about Kalen DeBoer flying across the country, Bama to California to Florida to Maryland to, hitting all these spots. But again, this spring feels a little bit different. It feels like they've narrowed their list down. And again, we're a month away. We're 6, 7 weeks away from the first visitor week in May, and it's going to be a monster in itself. Andrew, let's talk about Thursday. Had a couple of nice prospects that came in pre-spring game. And for anybody who thinks a spring game is not a big deal, I've had a lot of people saying it's changed. We're going to go over the list of some of the guys coming in. It's a big deal for these recruits, Andrew.
Yeah, no doubt. And we're going to start seeing guys that are going to arrive today that are going to spend the weekend in Tuscaloosa, whether that's Friday afternoon all the way until Sunday morning. But we did see a few guys sneak in yesterday for just a one-day visit. Those guys were 20, I think, most of them were 27 guys, including Gunnar Rivers, son of Philip Rivers, one of the top quarterbacks in the country in that 27 class out of St. Michael's down in Fairhope. Now, Gunnar did not receive an offer from Alabama yesterday. I wouldn't really look at that as he's not going to end up being an Alabama target. I think that's a guy that they like, that they're going to continue to evaluate. But this was his first time on Alabama's campus. I don't think they were going to make an offer right away. They want to evaluate him. They want to see him during the spring, maybe even during the summer, at least live. Because I think if you offer an in-state quarterback, you better be ready to take his commitment, because you don't want to offer a kid, he's ready to commit, and you say, well, let me wait a little bit. We got to watch a few other guys. And we've seen that with this coaching staff.
Especially Philip Rivers' son. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
They've only offered 2 other quarterbacks in this 27
Right.
class. And I wouldn't say those guys could call Alabama right now and commit. They still want to see these players throw in person, whether it's in the spring. And we saw it last year with Keelan Russell. Alabama extended an offer to Keelan Russell after they saw him throw. And of course,
And
everybody looks at it now and they're like, well, why wouldn't they offered him earlier than that? But they like
they
to.
saw a handful of more guys too. You remember he went through. They did very deep evaluation. So you're exactly right. Now, Andrew, I've got a theory that the 26 quarterback is going to affect who they pursue for the 27 quarterback. You think that could be the case? Seeing who you get. I mean, Zamet's a guy you and I both really like. Got Alabama in his top 4. Bama's definitely mixed there. But if you pile up another top 5 overall quarterbacks, probably hard to go get a Gunnar Rivers who's going to have his share of offers. If you get kind of the sandwich guy, maybe a little easier.
And I don't think they're going to sign a top 5. I don't even know if they're going to sign a top 10 quarterback in this 27 class. A lot of people, and I'm not saying that people are scared of Keelan Russell, but
They're scared.
that's a pretty big
They're
factor
scared.
there, especially with all the buzz that's coming. If you weren't hearing anything about Keelan this spring, maybe, but you're hearing a lot about Keelan, not necessarily being the starter right away, but he's been impressive, and people hear that, they see it on social media, they see it in the media. So it's going to be interesting to see how this weekend goes with Derek Zamet coming in for his first trip to Alabama. Going to make a decision in the next few weeks. He has the top 4, but I think it really kind of comes down to Washington, where he's got a great relationship with Jed Fish. Mississippi State, that coaching staff, Jeff Levy's done a really good job evaluating him, pushing for him. And now you got Alabama, Grubb, DeBoer, Sheridan. That relationship kind of goes back a couple months now. So we'll see how this weekend goes with Derek Zamet, and if Alabama either can lock him down or they're going to have to go into the spring looking for for a quarterback in this class. If they decide to take a quarterback in this class.
Yeah, and the one thing we've learned is they'll take their time to get it right. And again, like you said, everybody's like offering this guy, offer that. Remember the blank check for Juju? We had to write him a blank check for Juju stage, but I don't think they're going to do any of those things. Andrew, let's touch a little bit on the weekend visitors. I mean, there's a lot of them, but who's a couple that stand out to you that you're keeping your eye on? Because we have this visit list, and it's a great visit list. We do a lot of work. We confirm it with a lot of people, but there's still a ton of jockeying to get people. Who else having their spring game? Georgia, Auburn, Bam. I mean, all about Tennessee.
And what's crazy about Georgia is they're hosting official visits this weekend. And Alabama's not starting their official visits until late next month. And Georgia's one of the programs and there's other programs that are out there, but Georgia's having some big official visitors this weekend. But yeah, I mean, with Alabama, we have a list, almost 50 names on BOL right now. We spotlighted a lot of them in our feature on the site today. In-state guys, out-of-state guys, and the top names that we've seen in-state wise coming back to Tuscaloosa, but out-of-state, you got a guy like Jet Washington, one of the top safeties in the country out of Bishop Gorman out of Las Vegas. And it was about a year ago we were talking about on the show how we felt like Alabama was finally going to break the trend and get a recruit from Vegas. And of course, they had to flip one late in Derek Meadows to be able to get that. But Jet Washington's a guy that we're watching very closely because Alabama seems like they're in that top 2, top 3 for him, along with Oregon, some other schools, USC. So how good will his weekend go in Tuscaloosa? This is a nephew of Kobe Bryant. So he's also a star basketball player, just like his dad, or just like his uncle. But his father played football, his mom played basketball. I mean, this is a very athletic family. So I'm really interested to see how the weekend goes with Jet Washington.
Yeah, I tell you one, I'm really watching closely because there's a little bit of that controversy is Wiltz. Jaquez Wiltz is coming in-state guy. Auburn thinks he might show up back there. Alabama thinks he's showing up in Tuscaloosa. Kind of your tip your hand moment. That's kind of like one thing when it comes to Alabama and Auburn, the tip your hand moments kind of show up with Ryan Williams showing up when you don't expect him to, or Perry Thompson or Derek Smith showing up. They had to choose, so they're having to choose there. But Wiltz is a guy. I mean, he's a small school guy. I'm telling you, he looks like the drunk uncle at Thanksgiving that's just wearing his nephews out in the backyard thinking he's in the NFL. He's dominant at his high school.
Imagine being in the state championship game and You rush for over 300 yards. You score 5 touchdowns. You have 8.5 tackles on defense, an interception. I mean, this is this tremendous football player. But I think the interesting thing with Alabama and Jacquez Wilkes is he was offered back in late January. He hasn't been to Tuscaloosa yet. He's an in-state guy who loved Alabama growing up, but never been to Alabama for an official or for an unofficial visit, and has Alabama in his top 5. But has made a lot of trips over to Auburn, including 2 trips in the last week. So Auburn really looks like they are in the driver's seat as of right now. But if he makes it to Tuscaloosa this weekend, we'll kind of see where things go.
Yeah, I'll say Christian Robinson does a tremendous job of, and we've seen this, creating building relationships. I mean, Courtney Morgan and all those guys, the position coaches, all those guys will chip in. But Christian's a guy that when he locks on you, I mean, even Dawson Merritt, who ended up flipping to Nebraska, we know how hard it was for Dawson at the end of the day to tell Christian that he didn't want to go there. And of course, that's a big reason they got Justin Hill. But Alabama fans, they do have Christian Robinson recruiting him, which I feel is always a good thing as far as that. Andrew, talk about, give us one more guy. Pick as an in-state wide receiver who's 6'5". I won't tell you who to pick, but
Yeah,
in-state 6'5" wide receiver. You choose.
there's a long list of those guys. So Darian Morgan, number 3 wide receiver in the country out of Benjamin Russell. This is a kid that we talked about since last year. Received an offer last summer from Tide, and has been to Tuscaloosa several times. I mean, not just him coming up by himself, but with his entire family, who are all diehard Alabama fans. I mean, they were all at the cookout last summer. They've been in Tuscaloosa for games. They were at Junior Day, and now this is actually his first trip back to Alabama since that Junior Day in early February. So this is going to be a big trip for him. Coming off a trip to Auburn last weekend, he does have an official visit set for June the 20th. That's the last weekend of official visits during the summer. So we know Alabama's probably excited to get him on campus before the dead period. But it's going to be an interesting weekend with Sedarian. This is a guy that they really hold in high regard. They don't have a wide receiver commitment right now. He seems like the best option for them as far as a big name guy that could commit. So not necessarily this weekend, but it's a guy that we've been following and keeping a very close eye on.
Tell you what, it is obvious that safety and wide receiver, they are really, really picky, right? Because we're not hearing big numbers. Last year we didn't hear big numbers. They're like one safety. We're like, one safety? That can't be right. They'll sneak in another. No, they had one safety. The one they wanted, Ivan Taylor, was a monster who's living up to the billing. Wide receiver, we saw 2, 2 rock solid. That was it. Took Caleb Cunningham and Latzir. Caleb flipped, so they said, hey, we need our second. They go and get Derek Meadows, who you see him, you've seen some of the practice video, looks absurd, goes into that freaky category. So it's interesting how they're going to do. I tell you, guys, Xavier Kroll's one I'm watching too, because as Andrew said Morgan and Xavier, one of the top running backs in the country, they visited Auburn last week, and the returns coming out weren't super excited from the Auburn side. I think their momentum, and you're kind of, all this side, all of us, we're kind of reading the tea leaves, follow the visits and seeing that stuff. But obviously, I think Alabama survived those visits, get them back on campus. Xavier, I'm telling you, I think he's been there as much as Ryan Williams was. I mean, I think that considering him and Ryan both skipped a year, they've been there an absurd amount. But Kroll would be a big one, Andrew. But they got so many running back options. I feel like it's not hold me to this, but I feel like there's a good chance they'll take 2 this year if they can get them.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've seen a lot of running backs that have come through for spring practice. We've seen a lot of guys that have set up official visits, and Crow's not the only guy that's going to be in Tuscaloosa this weekend. Jonas Walton, a 4-star running back out of Georgia, is also a guy that currently slated to visit. So we'll kind of see what goes on with Jonas, who also has an official visit set. But I think Crow is certainly the guy that everybody's kind of following. Now he announced. Kind of surprising, but I think 2 days before he posted about kind of a cryptic tweet saying he might commit sooner than expected, and then the following day posted that his announcement was going to be on December the 31st. Now, for everybody that's kind of pays attention to recruiting, that's after the early signing period, but he still could sign and then announce that decision. He's a guy that's going to enroll in the late period anyway, but I find it hard to believe he's going to wait all the way until December the 31st to announce that decision after taking all those official visits during the summer. But we'll see what happens with Xavier. But another big weekend for him in Tuscaloosa. This is his third trip to Alabama since February. Only school he's visited multiple times this year, and we know he's an Alabama fan. So we'll see how the weekend goes.
Yeah, he's obviously going to have his attention from everybody. It feels like a pretty good running back class overall nationally. So plenty of those guys to go around. That's not always the case. And him jumping up a year puts him in there. The one thing I'm watching, the dominoes. So we've got 4 commitments: cornerback, edge rusher, that kind of bandit, Jamarian Matthews, Chris Booker, inside linebacker, and you got Jordan Edmonds and Zion Gibson. So 4
I would say
commitments.
Booker's a inside offensive lineman, not linebacker.
I'm just saying he's a very athletic. I'm not gonna limit his options, but yes, I misspoke. Very true. So you haven't really, the one I'm really watching, the position I'm watching, I think we're both watching, is the defensive line. Last year they didn't cast a wide net.
Right.
Alabama fans were upset. They were mad, but Alabama knew something the Alabama fans didn't know, which is fairly common, by the way. They knew that LT Overton, Tim Keenan, some of those guys were coming back, and they didn't need that many. They have the numbers in the room. This year's a little bit different. No defensive lineman. You have Matthews committed, the bandit, but I mean they're looking at taking 5 or 6 guys in this class, and there seems to be a bunch right on that edge of possibly committing.
Yeah, and you got some big guys that are going to be in Tuscaloosa this weekend. Kamarion Johnson's going to be back, in-state guy from Muscle Shoals. Emmanuel Ruffin from Bessemer City. Of course, Titan Davis, who we've mentioned. This is going to be his second trip this spring to Alabama out of St. Louis. Elijah Golden out of Florida. He's taken 2 visits this spring to Alabama. J.J. Finch was an early March visitor for Alabama. So there's a lot of names that are on the board that have set official visits to Alabama. So going to be an interesting summer once these guys come in over these next couple months, because I think, as you mentioned, I mean, they would like to sign 4 to 5 defensive linemen. Even though they have 0, I think there's a lot of momentum on the defensive front, led by Freddie Roach and that coaching staff.
Yeah, they're doing a good job. Now, Andrew, we get a lot of questions over and under RPM commitments predictions. To me, it's like, do you mean overall will they commit to Alabama after visiting? I don't think, in the old days, we'd get 3 or 4 commitments on a junior day, right? Didn't it feel like that, or a visitor's day? I think that's kind of slowed down now with people going home talking about it, because when you get into the NIL and this is it, and are you taking visits and all that stuff, slows down a little. But I mean, overall, the group that visits in this class and this Saturday, Thursday to Saturday, I expect them to get a fair amount of commitments from this group at some point.
At some point, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think when you see the names that are coming in, especially the in-state guys, and even some of these out-of-state guys, and a lot of these juniors that are coming back, guys that have been to Tuscaloosa multiple times already in that 27 class. I mean, I certainly think that we're going to see a lot of commitments at some point from this overall group. I wouldn't say this weekend. I wrote about it today on BOL. You look at the 26 group and you're like, all right, they're about a month away from taking their official visits. All of those guys have their 5 official visit dates.
Sure.
So they want to enjoy those free trips. I mean, why not? And I think with the 27 class, Alabama doesn't really push for. They're going to take a couple juniors if those guys are ready to decide and they want to commit, but they're not necessarily pushing for those guys, even regardless of how highly ranked they are, because they know they have another year and a half to go through this process. And a lot of those guys are still going to take visits. They're going to take official visits. It's going to be they probably just wouldn't see them really as a commitment just because it's a long process. But I don't necessarily think Alabama is going to get a commitment this particular weekend. They could. I think it would be a surprise if they did. But I do think that from the overall group, we're going to see several commitments.
Am I right that on February 1st, Alabama had that big visit list, huge visitors list? Were all 4 of the current commitments there for Alabama on that junior day on February 1st?
Yes.
All 4. Now, none of them committed that weekend, right? But they all.
Well, Gibson was already on board, but Matthews, Jordan
Booker.
Edmonds and Chris Booker. Now, Chris Booker, we talked about it a while back. He was the only guy on that weekend who did not have an offer, a previous
Yeah.
offer from Alabama. Got an offer from Alabama, committed a few weeks later. Everybody was like, "Oh, why did they take this guy without any other offers besides
Yeah.
USF?" Then Florida offers, then Georgia offers.
Yeah.
So
Zip.
good call by the Alabama
Zip.
coaching staff jumping on that kid early.
We saw that last year with Luke Metz. Luke Metz had really good offers to begin with. We're talking Michigan, Oklahoma, Tennessee. Those are not crappy offers in any world. Bama commits, and they're like, he doesn't have the big offers. There's a lot of criticism. And then Oklahoma, Georgia, full court press, Oregon, very much interested, offering him, trying to get him for a visit. Andrew, before we get out of here, spring game. Thoughts leading into it, excitement. We talked about with the other guys. I mean, I know you love football as much as I do. I mean, you're just excited for them to be playing, right?
There's some schools not having spring, I guess, practices on Saturday, and what A-days have always been about, to me, has been about recruiting. You get as many recruits on campus as possible. They get a chance to see all the fans. They see a practice. I mean, A-day game is a practice. I mean, it always, it's never an intense. They're going to keep the stars healthy. They don't want anybody to get injured, and I think it's good to be able to see some of these guys out there in practice. I think as far as the overall spring, it's been really good to kind of see the feedback and hearing from different sources about the freshman class, because this was Kalen DeBoer's first group. How good were they going to be? They were ranked high, number 3 recruiting class in the country, but how good were they going to be once they kind of came in, stepped on the field, and obviously, the great returns. And you guys talked about it in the previous segment, so we don't have to highlight a lot of those guys. But it's also good to hear about some of the sophomores that have.
No, give me two. Give me two guys. Me and you loved them as much as anybody. I mean, you were right there every Friday night with Latsir Brooks. You're putting the kids down, seeing how many touchdowns he scored. You were there every Friday night with Keelan Russell. I mean, give us a couple of guys. I mean, we covered. We had high expectations for a lot of these guys, and they're living up to it.
I always think it's funny to kind of see, especially this spring when Latsir Brooks is having such a great spring and seeing so many different people. I told you about Latsir Brooks.
Yes, come on,
nobody
come on.
did. Nobody did. We were talking about him last spring, last March, last April. Nobody kind of believed it that this kid, without really any offers, was going to be a top target, and could potentially be one of the best players in Alabama's class. And we were not to toot our own horn, but we were all over that very
Toot that
early
horn.
in the process. So good to hear about Latsir. And I think on the defensive side of the ball, hearing about, I know y'all talked about DeJohn Lee, but I'm going to talk about Justin Hill. Justin Hill's had an opportunity to really kind of step up with some injuries this spring. I've heard from different people, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that he has given them a lot of fits during practice. So I don't know how much he's going to play, but being able to have another pass rusher, guy that can get to the quarterback, I think that was certainly needed, because there wasn't really a lot of depth there last year. And even though he's just a freshman, I think we're going to see him play. And one guy that didn't get to practice this spring, Cavante Henry, really interested to see how he's going to perform once fall practice starts.
And people, he we reported fairly early that Hill had added almost 20 pounds in a relatively short amount of time. It's always fun to me when guys our age will say, no way you can put on 20 pounds that quick. I'm like, dude, I've seen you put on 15 at Disney World in a weekend. Like, these guys are eating and drinking and shaking and doing every single thing they've got right with the best of the best, putting it on. And not, I mean, obviously the 15 at Disney isn't the same that Justin put on, but it's amazing I mean, if you were 18, you remember you could get a 6-pack. It's not so easy now, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I struggled. I mean, I got it pretty quickly as a freshman in college, but it took me a little while to take some of it off. But
Yeah.
these I think what we heard a lot about last year from parents, from high school coaches, from a lot of these recruits was, a lot about the strength and conditioning program, the nutrition program at Alabama, how they felt like, I remember talking to Mike Carroll's dad, and he probably didn't mind if I shout him out here, but they took a couple visits late in the process. They kind of scared some people, and I remember talking to them after those visits, and they're like, these schools do not compare at all to what Alabama offers off the field as far as their nutrition program, and working with these strength coaches and everything, the sports science aspect of it as well. It really stood out to these parents and these players, and that certainly is a big selling point for Alabama on the recruiting side of things.
Andrew Bone, we're going to let you get out of here. We appreciate y'all. Always a great job. Charlie Potter and Blake Byler, they'll be there at the spring coverage. We'll have recruits. We're verifying them as they get on campus. There's just a lot going on. It's going to be a little bit quiet after this, so enjoy it as we lead into May. I mean, this is the end of spring practice. And I think it was I think it's the most important time in Kalen DeBoer's career at Alabama, because this feels like his team now. And nothing against last year's team, but there was a lot of Saban, Nick Saban flavor, as it should. But this team kind of feels a little bit more like his guys, and I'm really excited to see him, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely. We've heard that from so many different players throughout the entire spring, that it's a lot different now, and I think Coach DeBoer feels like it is his team, and he's ready to see what this team can do this fall. And I'm ready for it too. I think there's a lot of great players on this roster, and got to figure out who's going to end up starting for sure at quarterback. But I think every other position there's a lot of confidence there.
Well, I'm Tim Watts, and this is Andrew Bone. Andrew, tell your fans goodbye. Have a good weekend.
Have a great weekend, guys. Thank you for watching.
Thank y'all for watching. See you next week.